So we're coming to the end of the first Mishnah. And as we've discussed in the last couple of weeks, the first Mishnah gives a history lesson. It talks about the transmission of Torah. Moshe Kibbel Torah Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. We talked about why that particular formulation is used. Umasrali Yeshua, he handed it over to Yeshua. Yeshua is a Canaan, and Yeshua handed it over to the elders and the wise ones of his time. Uzukenim leNeviim, and the elders passed it to the Neviim, the prophets. Uneviim masruha la'anshe Knesset Hagadola, and the prophets passed it to the people of the great assembly. And we spent time last week talking about who were these people, what was the significance of this moment, and why they were called the men of the great assembly. And now we come to the last part of the Mishnah, which begins the style that we will see throughout Pirkei Avot of various rabbis, various Tanaim, rabbis of the Mishnaic period, giving Musa, giving maybe suggestions, maybe stronger than that, about how we should live our lives. So Haim, we'll see a discussion about whom is being referred to, but we'll right now go with the regular interpretation, but it means the Anshe Knesset HaGadola, these men of the great assembly. Amru Shalosha Devarim, they said three things. And the three things that they said were, Heve Matunim Badin, be deliberate or be patient in judgment, Vehe'emidu Talmidim Harbeh, and raise up many disciples or many students, Ve'asu Sayag LaTorah, and make a fence to the Torah. So the first thing to do is try and find some understanding of these phrases, and the classic commentator that we turn to for a basic understanding, shouldn't say basic, for a straightforward understanding, is Rabbi Bartanura. So in paragraph 2, he says, Haim Amru Shalosha Devarim, they said three things. Hirbe Devarim Amru. Harbe Devarim Amru. They said many things. Eile Shalosha Devarim Halalu Amru Hein Sheyesh Bahem Kiyum HaTorah. They said many things, but these three things were special. Basically, he's answering a fundamental question. What does it mean they said three things? There's 120 people in the Anshe Knesset HaGadola. Is it possible that in their entire life they only taught three things? Of course not. They taught lots and lots of things. So why are these three things singled out? So the answer of Rabbi Bartanura is Sheyesh Behem Kiyum HaTorah, because they are going to tell us how to maintain or preserve or establish the Torah. So we're interested in three things that they said about Kiyum HaTorah. And they are these three things. Of course, they said lots of other things, but these are the three things they said in relation to how we maintain, how we preserve, how we establish Torah. And the first thing they said, and now we're in the third line of number 2, Hevei matunim badim, be deliberate in judgment. That's how it's usually translated. What does that mean? She'im ba din lefanav, lefanecha, if a judgment comes before you. So there is a view that Pirkei Avot is really directed to dayanim, to judges. People who are sitting on a bet din and they have to know how to judge the case and what behaviors to adopt. There are others who say that's not correct, that Pirkei Avot is for all of us. However, at least here, Rav Avadja is saying that Hevei Matunim Badin is referring to how judges should act. That if a case comes before you, Pam Ushtayim Ushalosh, once or twice or three times, in other words, the same case seems to repeat itself, Lo tomar din zeh kavar ba lefanai v'shaniti v'shalishti ba. Don't say, I know what the answer to this case is because it's already come before me 2 or 3 times. It's familiar territory, and I can instantly pronounce a verdict because I'm familiar with the details of the case from previous versions. Don't do that. Eila hevu matunim, but be deliberate or be patient. Kulama mamtinin Kodem shetifsaku hadim. That is to say, wait before you pronounce the judgment. So each case deserves to be considered on its own, even if a similar case has come before one. Hevei matunim badin, be deliberate, be careful, be patient in judgment. And in paragraph 3, the second thing they said was, Vehemidu talmidim harbeh. Raise up, literally make stand students many. Make many students stand. The word ha'ameh, I just mentioned it, we're not going to discuss it in the Meforshim, but ha'emidu means to make stand up. So it means to not only have lots of students in your class, lots of students sitting on your every word, but you establish students so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. that they can be teachers and leaders of the next generation. That's what a teacher should do. It's not just to create followers, but to create leaders who will take over their role and can be independent. So, paragraph 3. Says the Bartanura, La'afuke midraban Gamliel. He says there's a little bit of a backstory here, because there were two opinions about who should gain entry to the Bet Midrash, who are suitable students. And there was the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. So we're a little bit out of chronological order, because Rabbi Gamliel was much later than the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, but that's not how Torah works. Torah works in the sense that somebody can be in one generation and can answer a question that was asked in a previous generation, or even can answer a question that was asked in a future generation. That's how Torah works. So the fact that Rabbi Gamliel, who we're about to quote, was much later than the Anshe Knesset Hagadola shouldn't bother us. And what did Rabbi Gamliel say? To Amar, end of line 1 of paragraph 3, Kol talmid she'ein tocho kabaru lo yikanes lebeit midrash. Any student whose inside is not like his outside, in other words, who's not a person of great integrity, cannot enter the Bet Midrash. Rabbi Gamliel had a very exclusive policy that the only Talmidim who were appropriate to become part of the continuum of learning Torah were those who were of a great integrity. That was one view. And there was another view that said anyone can come in. And says the Bartanura is that the Mishnah is telling us, Kamash Malan, Shemalamdin Torah L'chol Adam, that you should not be exclusive like Rabbi Gamliel, but you should teach Torah to everyone. Ve'ein sorich livdok acharav. And you don't need to check after them. You don't need to have an entrance exam to say, have you got enough integrity to come and learn Torah in our Bet Midrash? The Mishnah is saying, anyone can come and learn Torah. There is a slight caveat that the Bartanura puts in paragraph 3, line 3. As long as you don't know for sure that a person has got very bad behaviors. If somebody's obviously a Rasha, or clearly in some sense, which we don't spell out here, but in some sense really unsuitable to come into the Bet Midrash and be part of the Torah learning, then they shouldn't be coming in. But in general, if you don't know for sure that somebody is a bad person, inappropriate person, you can work on the basis they're an appropriate person, and they can all come into the Bet Midrash. And that, says the Bartanura, is the force of the words here in the Mishnah, Ha'amidu Talmidim Harber. Don't look for a small number of high-quality students. Look for a large number of whatever is the quality. And then jump to paragraph 4. The third thing that they said was Asu Sayag LaTorah. Make a fence around the Torah. So this is a famous phrase, a famous idea, and it refers to the practice that Chazal had of adding to the Torah mitzvot midorabanan, mitzvahs from the rabbis. I said adding to the Torah. We talked last week about how you can't add to the Torah. There's only 613 mitzvot. And what we said last week was a Navi cannot come, a prophet cannot come and say, Hashem has told me there should be an extra mitzvah. But the rabbis are different. The rabbis, as long as it's very, very clear what is a mitzvah midoraita, a mitzvah from the Torah itself, and a mitzvah from the rabbis, as long as it's very, very clear of that distinction, then the rabbis are enjoined to add mitzvot to the Torah, in the sense of to create a sayag LaTorah, a fence around the Torah. So there are lots of mitzvot midorabanan. In fact, the vast majority of the Shulchan Aruch, if you look carefully, is mitzvot from the rabbis rather than mitzvot directly from the Torah. And why did the rabbis add to the Torah? To safeguard the Torah. The idea of a fence is if you have a cliff and people are in danger of falling off the cliff, and you could put a fence at the very, very edge of the cliff, but there's a danger there because that fence can always be permeated, can be broken through, and if you break through the fence and it's the very edge of the cliff, then a person's going to fall down. What do? You put the fence a few meters back from the end of the cliff. So you say that this area at the edge of the cliff, in theory you could walk there, but there's a danger, so we're going to say don't walk there. We're going to make a fence that fences that part off. Similarly, there are many areas of life that the Torah says go ahead, and the rabbis say don't go ahead. Because if you do go ahead, then there's a danger you will actually come to transgress the law of the Torah itself. So I could give literally thousands of examples, but I'm just going to give one very obvious example, and that is the laws of muktzah on Shabbat. According to the Torah, there is nothing wrong with holding a pen, moving a pen on Shabbat, as long as you don't write with it. The prohibition is to write. what's wrong with holding a pen? Along come the rabbis and say, you're not allowed to move a pen on Shabbat. It's called muktzah. And the simple reason for that, and there is discussion about what is the basis of muktzah, but we won't get into that now. The simple reason for that is if you start moving a pen, you might mistakenly come to write with the pen. So the rabbis say, not only does the Torah say you can't write, we, the rabbis, will say you can't move the pen. And they do this in, as I say, every area of halakha, every area of life. So let's go back to the words of the Bartanura in paragraph 4. Va'asu sayag laTorah, geder shelo yavo liga be'isur Torah. That means a fence or a boundary so that someone should not come to transgress, or literally to touch, the prohibition of the Torah itself. Now he gives another example, which I'm not going to go into details about, kagon shniyot ha'ariyot, secondary forbidden relationships. The Torah gives a list of people who can't be married to each other because of close family connections, and the rabbis expand it with many more people, more distant relatives, who cannot marry, because if you make sure you don't marry even distant relatives, you won't come to marry close relatives. That's the basic idea. And the other one is the one I already mentioned, v'shavut l'Shabbat, the extra prohibitions that the rabbis added to the laws of Shabbat. Dichtiv, and why did they do this? They learned from a pasuk, and the pasuk says, "Ushmatem et mishmarati," you shall guard my guardings. So it's not enough to guard; you have to guard the guardings. And from here we learn, "Asu mishmeret lemashmarati." You should make a guarding to what I God originally tell you to guard, and that is one of the sources for the idea of the rabbis making extra prohibitions, and that is what is mentioned in the pasuk in the Mishnah here. "Va'asu sayag laTorah," make a fence to the Torah. So here's a sheet. Okay, so as I say, that's a fairly straightforward explanation of what's going on here. Now I want to see some other ideas from some other Meforshim. So in number 5, Rabbeinu Yonah, a Rishon, who writes many things, including a perush on Pirkei Avot. He's like everyone whom we're going to encounter, they have a lot to say, and I'm just bringing some extracts. And if it doesn't convey the full flavor of what these Gedolim are saying, then the fault is mine. But let's just see one paragraph from Rabbeinu Yonah, because I thought it's a very particular insight into the idea of asula sayag laTorah, making a fence to the Torah. So he says in number 5, Ki inyan shenema, as it says in the pasuk, as we just said, ushmatem et mishmarati, kulama asu mishmaret lemishmarati. You shall guard my guarding, so you should make a guarding to what I've originally told you to guard. And then he says, and here's the interesting point, v'hasayag hu davar gadol. The idea of a fence is a great thing. Umushubach la'asot sayag, v'geder lemitzvot. And it's a very praiseworthy thing to make a fence, and then another word for a fence, around the mitzvot, l'kol yuchal, l'chikashel behem, to anyone who is likely to stumble in them. Because people, if they didn't have the extra security of the fence, they would come to, as we saw before, touch the prohibition of the Torah itself, and they might stumble, and they might make a mistake, and they might actually transgress the words of the Torah. And then he says, middle of line 3, Hayare et davar Hashem. Somebody who makes a sayag, a fence, is somebody who fears the word of Hashem. So at various times in these shiurim, we're going to talk a lot about ahava and yira, loving Hashem and fearing Hashem, and the balance that we have to have between the two. And here Rabbeinu Yonah says, making a fence around the Torah and observing those additional prohibitions is a testament to somebody's fear of Hashem, fear in a good sense, being in awe of Hashem. L'chein hamakayem et divrei Chazal, someone who fulfills the words of Chazal, shehem sayagem lemitzvot shel Torah. And when we're talking about the words of Chazal, who make these extra prohibitions on top of the Torah, chibed hayira, they are loving the yira, or their yira is an expression of love, not love in the sense of ahava, but they have great yira of Hashem. That's what we mean. Somebody who says, you know what, I know Hashem said I can't write on Shabbat, and I'm going to make sure that I don't write on Shabbat. I'm not even going to touch a pen. I'm not going to move a pen. They're showing how much they are in awe of Hashem's mitzvot. And somebody who observes these additional prohibitions has greater yira, middle of line 4, paragraph 5, mimisha oseh ha-mitzvah atzmo, more than somebody who does the essential mitzvah itself, the mitzvah from the Torah. Ki ein asiyat ha-mitzvot hochacha liyira. Because somebody who does just the regular mitzvot, that's not an indication of their fearing of Hashem. Kamo hashomer l'sayagim shehu nizhar mitachila. As compared to somebody who keeps the fences, which we're warned about or they're required, shelo yavi lidei peshia, so that they don't come to a negligent act of transgression. So I'll put it in perhaps clearer English. Somebody who keeps the basic mitzvot is keeping the basic mitzvot. And maybe they have great yirat Hashem, a fear of Hashem, or maybe they don't. But somebody who keeps the sayagim, somebody who keeps the additional rabbinic mitzvot which are there to safeguard the Torah, is showing how much they want to safeguard the Torah for themselves. They're showing how much they want to be careful to avoid any inadvertent transgression of the Torah itself. And by keeping the sayagim, keeping the extra fences, the mitzvot midorabanan, they are demonstrating their great yirat Hashem, their fear of Hashem, which is a good thing. So sayagim, he's explaining why he says in the second line, "Zedavar gadol u'mushubach la'asod sayag." It's a great thing, and it's a praiseworthy thing to make a sayag. It's not just there's a danger you might fall off the cliff, but more than that, you are showing your reverence for the mitzvot of Hashem